Good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to see so many people who have joined today. And I'd like to welcome you to this British Chamber of Commerce in Luxembourg event in collaboration with Tomorrow Street and Vodafone. My name is Sarah Speed, and I am a member of the Council at the Chamber, as well as Chair of the Financial Services Group. I think we would all agree that diversity is key in helping our teams flourish and to drive high performance. Our distinguished panel this evening is drawn from the tech ecosystem. However, I think the themes they will be discussing are relevant for all of us. And I sincerely hope that you will have some takeaways and insights during this session that you can then consider and apply in your own work environments, wherever that may be. Please don't hesitate to use the Q&A function or the chat function to send in your questions for the panel. And we will be keeping some time at the end of the session to pose those questions and discuss them. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Shivani Sondhi, Innovation Manager at Tomorrow Street, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Shivani Sondhi, and as Sarah said, I'm an Innovation Manager at Tomorrow Street. Tomorrow Street is a joint venture between Vodafone and Technoport, a Luxembourgish incubator. We work with late-stage scale-ups to harness their technology and grow them both within the Vodafone and the broader market ecosystems. As a woman and a person of colour, I know what it feels like to be an outsider or the other, and not just in a technology company. Since joining the sector in London and now Luxembourg, I've seen firsthand the lack of representation within the industry and also in the scale-up ecosystem. For many listening today, we know that greater representation translates into business value, but we also know that it's just the right thing to do. We can all play a role in changing the game. So because of this, I created an initiative where women in technology and in our scale-up companies could come together to see how we can make a change within our own ecosystem. At the beginning of this journey, my engagement with other women concluded in the same view, that the thoughts I had of being an outsider were not just mine, and we need more representation. It was something collective that a lot of the women felt, from across the spectrum of age, race, seniority, and other backgrounds. So what we have created now is a community of 8 scale-up companies and Tomorrow Street and Technoport, who meet monthly to discuss the challenges and how we can enable each other to drive the agenda forward. And what is our vision for the future? To be able to create awareness like we're doing today through our webinar, and to bring those around us on our collective journey to facilitate the change and ensure that in the coming years, we have an industry with greater gender balance and more representation of people from minority groups. So today, I ask you to listen, enjoy the conversation that will be had by our panelists, and consider how you can integrate what you hear into your own work life, home life, and also spark those meaningful discussions that work towards making a change in your ecosystem. I'll now hand over to Lisa Burke, broadcaster and creator of RTL Today, to introduce our panel.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. And thank you very much, Shivani. And I hope we can have a fun and exciting conversation. The title is Layers of Expertise Do Foster an Environment Which Allows All to Thrive. And we have, as Shivani and Sarah said, fantastic people on our panel. So firstly, a great pleasure to introduce my friend, Jenna Elvin, co-founder and chief TADA officer of TADA Web. And many of you living in Luxembourg will know her very well. Also from Luxembourg, Nasser Zuberi, CEO of the Luxembourg House of FinTech. And joining us from Ireland, just a little bit further afield, we've got Anne O'Leary, who is CEO of Vodafone Ireland. And finally, all the way the other side of the Atlantic, joining us is Katie Palenchar. I've just been given direct instructions of how to pronounce this name. Katie Palenchar, who is leading the Female Innovators Lab at Anthemis, which invests in early stage female founded fintech businesses. Welcome to you all. Great, I can see you all now as well, which is super. It's so nice to have you all here. Really, my first question, and when I started discussing this with the British Chamber of Commerce here in Luxembourg, is why are we still talking about gender when it comes to tech businesses? Why is that? Go ahead, Anne. I think you have a few thoughts here.
Hello, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to everyone. I'm delighted to join you here from our Vodafone offices in Ireland. We're just back, really, 2 days a week in a hybrid work, but it's lovely to be back in the office some of the time, at least during the week. So, Lisa, I mean, what's my story? I suppose I've been CEO over 8 years in Vodafone Ireland, and when I joined, I said I was going to focus on gender diversity. And it was because I saw the unconscious biases and things that I'd experienced myself for many years in the tech industry. And now I'm delighted to say we're 56% female at executive level and 53% female at people manager level within Vodafone Ireland. And I think on the back of that, Lisa, I've created, you know, a really inclusive culture and a very successful business on the back of it. And a bit like you, Lisa, I do say, how am I still talking about this? Now, obviously, gender has been a key focus here, and it continues and it never stops. I put a lot of policies in place to make sure it's an equal opportunity place for women and men, so everybody can reach their full potential. We measure everything. You know, I can talk about the policies, whether it's maternity leave, parental leave, or domestic violence policy, or menopause policy, all flexible working policies, all the things that have been put in place to really create a company that can sustain women in business, especially during the times when they're having children or when the children are young. And when I suppose one of the focuses for me was a lot of my friends gave up work when they had children, and the reasons were: one, access to quality, affordable childcare; two, they felt inflexible policies at work, that they couldn't talk to their employer about having flexible time or the issues they needed or the support they needed; and thirdly, the inequality they felt that was there in reaching the top because of being a woman. I still think, look, we've made good progress on the ISEC boards in Ireland and the FTSE 100 and 350 boards, but still at executive level in a lot of companies, and especially in tech companies, there is still issues around gender. And I know we talk about race, ethnicity, LGBT, etc., but I say if you can't get gender right, we'll never get the rest, especially when 50% of the population is female. So it is something I've been committed to and work on, and it is led from the top. And I've seen in companies and in different teams where it's, you know, led from the top, it does happen and it can get delivered, but we can never stop focusing on it, unfortunately.
Do you know, thank you, Anne, and thank you for that wonderful statement. I love it when I have fantastic panelists on, because I have to do so little. I throw it open to you and we have about 50 answers in one. Thank you so much. I know you're passionate about it, and I know that you've driven change as CEO of Vodafone Ireland, which is fantastic. But the same question, well, really, I'm going to go through all of you. I'm going to pick Jenna next, actually, moving into you. You are leading a company, a tech company, of course, as many people here in Luxembourg and beyond Luxembourg know very well. Do you feel it's still something we ought to be discussing, or should we just face the facts of, for instance, the CVs you get in? Tell me about the CVs you get in. Are they 50-50, or how do you cope with that?
Yeah, sure. So obviously for us, I mean, just being a woman founder in the tech sector, it's obviously not something that we see every day. So I myself have been through all the challenges of having to prove myself as a young woman in tech. For me personally, I think if you look at the CVs that we get, primarily for sort of the engineering roles and things like that, we've had to go global if we really want to attract a diverse number of applicants. And so for us, the challenge is always hiring the right person for the job. So I've never believed in quotas. I believe in, as we might talk about later, but I think there's other ways that we as leaders and as people in technology companies, well, in any companies actually, can actually foster diversity and foster sort of women getting ahead and multiple different types of people getting ahead. But for us, yeah, we just simply don't receive the number of applicants that we need in order to be more diverse as a company when it comes to gender. So we've, like I said, we've gone to our global kind of application base, and maybe we can touch on it later, but in order to sort of compensate for that, what we've really tried to start doing is actually empowering a lot of the people that work for us so they can then empower their families. So maybe it's another topic that we'll touch on, but we have a different approach that we really try and use to, if you look at the global scheme of things, try and really work around to actually sort of non-directly impact and change the amount of diversity that we're having in the workplace.
Well, I know, having spoken to Anne last week or so, that she has strong views as well on trying to find the people and trying to open that pool up, as you say, to cast the net wider. I'm going to now move to Katie and Nasser, because you're both in the fintech sphere of work. So you're both kind of looking at a similar pool, perhaps, except Katie, you are focused on females. So really, starting with you, Katie, how have you managed this over in the States?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think your question in the beginning is really interesting, of like, why are we still talking about this? And I think that's kind of flipping that of like, we haven't been talking about it enough over the years, and like to kind of bring it to the forefront. So I currently lead Female Innovators Lab. We're early stage female founded fintech fund in partnership with Barclays, but is a part of Anthemis Group, which is a leading fintech venture capital firm based in both the US and Europe. And so, early days, I've been on the other side of the table as a founder myself. And it's funny because like, I feel like one of those people that's like back in the day, but I mean, it was really like, I look back in 2012, and in the US specifically, you didn't bring up like how many female founders are in your portfolio, what's the investment team look like? You would never even talk about that. And like kind of these underground, if you will, like networks started to pop up where we would share, hey, like this investment team does have, so many female founders in their portfolio. They've been committed to this. And so when you look at kind of those networks that have been formed, then what started to come out of that is like a group possibility to talk about these things, just like how we're doing this here today. So I think that's kind of like first and foremost of just like being really explicit and just not talking about it. I think that's why it's interesting, panelists today, and to Jenna's point, from like talking about it from a global lens of like, we believe in approaching the kind of gender diversity discussion topic, not just from investing in companies, but our investment team. We're split 50-50 female and male. And for a fintech venture investment team, that's pretty unique. And then we're also looking at it of like, working with universities, working with corporates like Barclays, et cetera. So we really believe that it's not just about deploying capital into female founders. Of course, that's our core business at the end of the day, in deploying capital, but also like how we approach it of every side of the landscape, because we believe that that will create a virtuous cycle outcome that will have real impact in feeding into all of these networks.
Thank you, Katie. And finally, turning to you, Nasser, I know you're the token man on this panel, and we're not kind of just going to ram you here, but and sorry, I do apologize. Luxembourg House of Financial Technology, the Loft. Yes, I shouldn't have said. Yes, I know you care about that very, very much. So, should we still be talking about gender when it comes to tech companies?
Thank you, Lisa. That's a very interesting question. I don't know if I'm in a position to say yes or no on that. I guess you can argue that I'm on the privileged side. I am a man, and gender debate tends to focus on the gender equality from the female side. I do wonder from data that I've seen and the reading I've done, where at what point the issue arises. And I think some of the questions that I've seen come up in the chat.
Oh.
You know, I do wonder, you know, whether there is an issue in the Western world, and I will speak maybe specifically about the Western world, in relation to opportunity in the workplace. I think data that I've seen from, say, for example, Corn Ferry, when they surveyed, I think, around 20,000 job positions and applicants, that opportunity, particularly at entry level, tends to be open and without too much bias. But the issue, as I think some of the other panelists have pointed to, tends to be more in the senior management positions, sort of when you get into your 30s and 40s, of, you know, when people start making life decisions and having children, etc., and the integration of that back into the workplace to ensure that those people aren't impeded. And that's a tricky situation. I mean, choices at school, I think a lot of things can still be done. I mean, Lisa, you are a master's graduate in sciences, which is incredible in itself, from Cambridge University, and we need to see more maybe diversity in the choices people make at school, at university, and then in their future career path. You know, again, to cite some data, when we look at Iceland, you know, I think many of you will have noted they just voted in the first majority female parliament earlier this week. And you look at data around university there, and then about roles and careers people take. More women graduates than men in Iceland. But then, interestingly enough, you know, and you know, maybe fitting stereotypes here. When you look at the care industry, 90% are women. When you look at the technology and engineering industry, be it better than in most countries, but still 70% are men. And this is in the most egalitarian society as regarded by most people on the planet. As I say, I think, you know, personally speaking, I think, you know, given my name, my color of my skin, yes, I think I may have suffered some issues in my career and blockages. I cannot step into the shoes of a woman and the experiences she's had. I'd like to believe that I promote equality. And as Jenna said, to me, it's about opportunity and not fulfilling quotas. I don't like the idea of quotas. I want to hire the best person for the job, man, woman, whatever race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, never has bothered me. My workforce happens to be 50-50, and I believe that's a positive thing. I do have women that have gone on maternity leave, and we always ensure that they are integrated back in at the same level without any impediment as much as possible to their career. We also champion the female workforce that we have in terms of ensuring that they get equal opportunity to be in the spotlight, to showcase their brand to the world and the incredible effort and work that they do. But likewise, I think that's important that that's done on an equal basis. You know, we work in an industry, finance and technology, which has just generally traditionally been male orientated. I would like to see more diversity. I'm a little saddened at the moment in Luxembourg that some of that diversity has gone, particularly at the executive level. I have 19 people on my board from, you know, industry leaders, CEOs and MDs, and people from government. I remember at one point that was almost 50-50 board representation, but as people have left their jobs or gone on to new roles, right now I have 4 out of 19 that are women on my board, and I don't think that's satisfactory. We face incredible challenges. We run a lot of webinars and seminars and we face incredible challenges and often get attacked because we don't have 50-50 women representation on these panels. And again, I like to point out that we always try our best to ensure we have equal representation. Maybe you could argue we could try harder, but ultimately I'm going to try and fit in the right people for the right job and for the right speaking slot. And sometimes it just happens that is men. I want to understand better what we can do as a whole. I mean, we've talked a lot that there is an issue, but to me, it's more about if there is an issue, how do we go about and solve that? And unfortunately, I don't think I necessarily have the answer to that. I think a lot of people try a lot of things. Vodafone seems to be very successful from what I'm seeing. But I wonder how easy that is to implement in a smaller company, particularly given the vast number of SMEs there are on the planet, and particularly in an industry like tech.
Well, that is a very good point. Well, I have a lady I'm going to turn to now who has some answers, and that will be Anne. But you raise a very good point there at the end, which is, Anne, you're CEO of a very large company in Ireland there. How does it transfer to smaller companies? So I do want to dig into your policies. I'm just going to drag up some of the questions here from a few people. Susanna Toole is asking about quotas, and she says quotas is a really interesting topic, and whilst not the potential best option, if we don't adopt something like that, what other systematic policy changes would you say are needed and would potentially work? Now, I know you have put in policy, Anne, because we discussed it in a preparatory chat, and I would like you to talk about that and how you think that could also be executed in a smaller company. And then we also have questions, you may have seen them coming in, about schooling, etc. But we'll focus for now on quotas, policies that you as a company can put in place. Can those policies be brought down and disseminated into smaller companies? And then we might move on to the policy that can be put in from a culture or governmental point of view, because we are crossing the globe here a bit. Anne.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So look, firstly, I am part of a large organization, so I am no expert on SMEs. So Nassar, just to be clear, I have the greatest admiration for small businesses, but that's not my background. So I am, we've about 2,000 employees here in Vodafone Ireland, and actually, you did mention something about getting women on panels and to speak, and it can be difficult. I hear a lot of that actually, Nasir, and actually that's why when I'm asked, I go on, because actually, and I say to my female senior leaders and that, if you're asked, because sometimes they go, oh, I don't really want to, or I don't want the attention, I don't have the time. And I say, well, you need to, because actually there are people out there looking for female voices. So we need to lean in and put ourselves forward as well. So we have a bit of a responsibility there to stand up and do it. So when I'm invited to speak, I always say yes, just actually, if it's only to inspire other companies to do some of it, or to inspire younger women that they can reach the top of the tech company. And that's just to say as well, I do want to call out, mostly I worked for men throughout my career, and it was the men that sponsored and mentored me and promoted me. So I do want to acknowledge this. This isn't a he or she thing. On the quotas thing, look, the 30% club, which was set up to improve the female representation on boards of the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 350, wasn't done on quotas, it was done on targets. They set KPIs, they set targets, and companies got behind them. And we've done the same here in Ireland with our listed companies. And I think, like all of us, we have revenue targets, we have profitability targets, we have KPIs and NPS on churn and everything. The same thing can be measured on gender and all types of diversity. And I think that is the first thing we all need to do. What gets measured and gets rewarded and focused on gets done. And managers in companies and leaders, unfortunately, sometimes I do it because I believe in equality, and I, really purpose-led in doing good and doing good business. And it's at the core of what I'm about as a CEO. And I believe gender equality is core. But not everyone, even though they believe it, are so passionate about it. And maybe they'll take the easy route rather than trying harder. I know over the years, many times for roles. They've come in and they said, here are the 5 people. We have no females, or there is no females, or whatever. And I've just sent them out again. Find females. I'm not saying it's easy in every industry, but we need the slate of females for every role. We look at our talent, we look at our succession planning, we look at reward, we look at promotions. Our graduate recruitment is now 50% female, 50% male. And we really measure who leaves our company. Everything is measured. Our surveys on how people are feeling, how are the women feeling, how are the men feeling. Everything is measured, and leaders have KPI targets on gender. But let me tell you, a woman has never been given a role because she's a woman. In fact, usually she has to be better, if I'm very honest. So I have never seen this token thing in my whole life that people talk about. So then in terms of policy, so I would have rolled out a world-class maternity leave policy many years ago, 26 weeks maternity leave, plus when women come back, they work 4 days a week, get paid 5 days. The women that return from maternity love this, and on average, the women stay 9 years. So in terms of loyalty and retention of staff, it's a key tool, especially when I'm competing with the Microsofts, Googles, and Facebooks in Ireland for talent. I really want to keep my female talent. And I also understand that women are the only ones at the moment that can have children. And I'm happy that they're going to populate the world. So I'm fine with it. And the budget is held centrally, not in particular areas. Then we brought out parental leave. So non-birthing parents, which is usually a father, but it can be LGBT couples, can take 16 weeks fully paid leave in the first 18 months. What that has done is most men said to me, I want to spend more time with my children. I want to support my wife or partner. I can't afford to take the time off. Well, this removed the financial consequences because 16 weeks is fully paid. And also the women are now saying, I'm not being prejudiced because I'm a woman going for a role. Yes, I might take maternity leave, but the men in Vodafone are now taking a few months off to support the mum or the new baby or the rest of the family. And then we brought out domestic violence is a big issue in the world. It's a particular issue as well in Ireland, especially during COVID. We brought out a policy because 1 in 4 women are affected by coercive control or domestic violence, and people can take 10 days leave, fully paid, access to bank accounts, access to advance in salaries, and advance access to counselling and support. So again, bringing up taboo subjects that people might not want to talk about. Menopause is an issue that affects women between the ages of 45 and 55. We did a survey that said 60% of women felt uncomfortable talking about it at work, or it affected them at work. Again, the life cycle of women. This and between the ages of 45 and 55 is often when women are at that senior leadership perspective. We want everyone to have a culture where there's psychological safety, where people can discuss issues, also where managers, whether they're female or male, can learn about these subjects and just educate and build awareness on it. So that was menopause. And I have to tell you a last one that I'm really excited about. The head of my women's network came to me 8 weeks ago and they said, did you know that in the ladies' rooms in Vodafone Ireland, we don't have access to free period products? And I said, oh no, we're now talking about menopause and we're now talking about periods. These are all the things in Ireland that were never discussed, right? And she said, what do I do? I said, go put them in, go do it, fine, no problem. But what she did, they came back and they found 3 Irish young women who have launched a subscription model called Riley. It's called The Life of Riley. And it's sustainable, eco-friendly, organic, cotton, healthy, and so we're supporting a young entrepreneurial female startup. We've launched it. They've now got big corporates on board, so supporting female entrepreneurs and talent, as well as sustainable planet and supporting women. So it just gives you an idea of what we do here in Vodafone to talk about issues of inclusivity and to make people feel, especially women, that they belong and that they can reach the top of the company. And I believe, you know, my stats say it. I have 56% female at executive level and 53, I have 130 people managers and 53% of them are female. So I really believe it can be done in every industry, SMEs, I know there may be issues, but certainly it's still not in all our Vodafone countries. It's still not in every tech big corporate, but it has to be CEO led, and leaders need to understand it's as important as revenue growth and profitability, and sustainable and focusing on our planet and doing good business is really the key for me.
Thank you so much. And you've got so much energy. I'm sure you just kind of like your black hole, you just kind of inspire people in your circle. I don't know where Vodafone have all of their bases, but we have one message here from Dennis. I'll try and pronounce your surname, Niederinghaus, I think it is. And so he loves the discussion. He says we're mainly focusing on the Northern Hemisphere, and says to Mr. Saberi's point, and perhaps what you were saying, quotas may be unavoidable to tilt the scale towards gender equality in many African and Asian countries. So I just wondered, given that you are with the biggest company, Anne, how do you see the equality equation in other Vodafone countries, let's call them?
Yeah, so look, Vodafone's objective is to be the best place to work for women by 2025. That's a global policy. And I think the stats at the moment in Vodafone globally is about 32%, and they want to get to 40% female. I'm actually on the South African board, and there's a real focus on female and female Black talent as well. So women of color. And again, there's KPIs. Quotas, when we talk about quotas, it's kind of legislative, and that frightens people. So I talk about targets and a vision, and a plan to support that. So agree in African countries, certainly for Vodacom, that's our commitment, and that's what we're focusing on. But it needs to be done in all different countries, and different areas have different things. But certainly I've seen in Vodacom the recruitment and the promotion of a lot of female Black talent recently, and I'm delighted to see it.
And I'm going to just throw, no, so I don't want to focus on you too much, Anne, but you're getting a lot of praise here in the chat. Somebody else is saying that have you benefited from the improved retention?
Oh, like the business case is the loyalty, the retention of talent is key for all of us. Yeah, especially now post-COVID, and again, especially in Ireland, where the war for tech talent, it's really there. And, I do have to compete with these very large corporates, and it is hard. So what I find with a lot of my female talent is the flexibility they have in Vodafone Ireland around outputs rather than presenteeism is there, that their opportunity to reach the top is fair. They can see they have a good chance of doing it. And we recently appointed a chief networks officer and a chief IT officer, and they were both females that have been with the company over 20 years, worked in various countries and different areas. And I would have sponsored and mentored them over the years. So, this is about, supporting your female talent as they come up the organization and through their life cycle. And look, we know if somebody leaves, the cost of recruiting a new person, bringing them in, learning the culture, settling in. So I really, really want, and I like to move people around and across our organization in Ireland and to the other Vodafone countries, because they bring back diversity of thought, different cultures. We also have people from Vodafone from, France, Hungarian, CBU director, I have Spanish, and I love that diversity as well as an active LGBT community, diversity and ability as well. So we have, other employee resource groups as well. But I always say, if we don't get gender right, the rest doesn't follow. And honestly, I would also say our innovation, we're market leading in Ireland. We have the largest market share. We're a premium player. We're in mobile and fixed, and we outperform our competitors. And I believe it's the culture and the diversity and inclusion, especially around gender, that we have that has created that differentiation and that winning in the market. So while it's something that I'm passionate, that I feel good about, it has produced superior business results as well. And you know, that's very important as a CEO. I need to do that and to win in the market.
Thank you, Anne. I mean, really, I think you could take away the hour quite quickly, but I'm going to move across the waters now to Katie. And you have set up your own, you know, you had your startup, your tech startup, and now you're a real mentor within Anthemis. And I want to talk again about policies, but from a different perspective, because from my knowledge of American policy, it's not the kindest to women when it comes to things like maternity leave, or men, of course, you know, it is partnership often. So what can you do in the world that you live in, or what do you see women doing, or what choices do you see women making? Because I would just throw into the mix, I mean, you have great policies in place, Anne, but I think certain women are choosing to be more independent and to be in charge of their own work so that they can choose their own flexibility. So what do you see, Katie, in the whole female world that you live in? What do women want? What changes have been made? And do you think governments can also put in place better policy to aid all sorts of business?
Sure, yeah. I think with what Anne's doing is so interesting, and kind of, you know, she isn't just looking at it from like, okay, let's get more female talent in-house. And it's like, what happens when they get in? I almost saw this kind of like wheel of life and like their kind of, you know, cycle and within the organization, and just, right, even the example of, you know, putting female founded products within the bath, you know, within the restrooms and the loo. It's really interesting to me. And that's what I'm talking about, these like virtuous cycle outcomes of, you know, just not attacking it from like, okay, here's the quota, this is what we're going to try to achieve. I think something, you know, if you kind of like peel back the layers of quotas, something that interesting that our organization does at Anthemis is, you know, we don't necessarily have quotas of women, men, but what we do kind of look for in a balance within our organization. And, you know, I always put the disclaimer, it's easier where, you know, we're 50 people, so we can be much more agile. But we look at kind of cognitive diversity and diversity of thought. And so 50% of our employees come from traditional financial services and 50% do not. So if you kind of look at the kind of systemic history of more male dominated fields and financial services, if we just keep recruiting from that pool and years and experience of that, like, how are we going to, you know, kind of, you know, bring in a more diverse workforce? And so, you know, that includes like bringing in operators. So myself, I don't come from a traditional background of financial services, but I'm investing in fintech, but, you know, a history of launching companies, growing companies from an operator's perspective. And then it also makes us balance and bring in younger talent to cultivate that over the long term, right? So even as something as simple of, you know, bringing in more interns or junior talent that haven't worked in financial services necessarily. And so we're constantly looking at that 50-50 balance. And what happens is a kind of, again, network effect from cognitive diversity. You start to see different backgrounds, right? You see different, you know, from a gender perspective, from a cultural perspective. And we think, you know, added benefits of that are kind of the innovation that spurs from this. So that's one way that like we really approach it. I think the other thing is like, you cannot be what you do not see. And that's the other thing that we really put at the forefront. So myself personally, I did not meet my first female founded tech CEO until 10 years ago. And that really changed literally the course of history of my life. I never even thought that that could be something that I could do. It never occurred to me. I grew up in a small town where, you know, in a very rural town where, you know, pretty much the choices were nurse and teacher. And those are amazing careers. I was a teacher for a period of time in my life. But I mean, it's just like even subconsciously of seeing that, of seeing, oh, you know, when you come into an organization like Anne's, of seeing other women and the roles that they're at and kind of that, you know, different perspectives that they've brought into organization is just so key to all of this. And I think that, you know, kind of on my last point here, as you talk about kind of, it is frustrating, and I always just kind of put my head down when I'm on panels with UK, European policies around maternity leave and childcare, and we are just so far behind on that. But this is actually a really interesting thesis that we're digging in, because we see this as a financial services, a fintech issue as well, right? Because workplace equity leads to financial equity. So we are very interested in investing in companies in the childcare space, in kind of women's compensation, benefits, et cetera, underrepresented groups, because we believe that leads to financial equity and the way money moves. So I see this as a really exciting opportunity. Hopefully, COVID has accelerated and brought this to the forefront. We're starting to see under our own administration, really policies brought forward. And I don't think it's just the policies that will change things. I think it's the businesses that are born out of kind of implementing these policies. For example, we have a business here in the US. They will pop up childcare centers within your organization, within your company, and come in and pop that all up for you. That's a super interesting business. What is also interesting about it is that our government has provided tax credits for businesses that do this. And so this software company is going to help them apply for all the tax credits, help them pop up the childcare centers. So, I think there's a real kind of change and impact coming. And this is definitely like a thesis that we are so involved in. So, kind of with the pitch out there is like, we don't just look at what you see as traditional fintech. We see this embedded kind of finance thesis that definitely involves gender and women's workplace issues.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. And you don't need to hold your head in shame. It's not your fault what the American policies are. And it's a grassroots kind of movement from underneath, I think it often is. Now, Jenna, you are from the other side of the world, actually, so perhaps you can be part of the Southern Hemisphere mindset as well. But from your point of view, I mean, you've grown your own company, you've seen it expand. Tell us about how you manage that, not just gender diversity, but diversity in essence across your company, and just what, to Katie's point as well, we hear all about diversity these days. I know Anne said earlier, if we don't get the gender thing right, we can't start focusing on the other things. But so many companies, the large ones in particular, have these now diversity experts on their teams. And there's a load of research showing that the more diverse the team is, the more innovative it can be. What do you do? What do you do with Tadaweb? What do you see as well? Not just what do you do, but what outcomes do you see?
Yeah, sure. So I think I've always, so coming from New Zealand, I've grown up in a country that's always been open to diversity, open to encouraging women, open to encouraging young people. And so for me, it was kind of just a part of my DNA. And I think having started my company at 22, so really, really young, I guess I leveraged my naivety. So basically, am I cutting out? Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. The picture's frozen, but I did hear you just a minute ago. You do seem to have gone right now. But meanwhile, I wonder if Naz is still there. I can't see him or hear him. Oh, you're there. Right, Jenna, back to you while Naz has come back to life. Back to you, Jenna. You there, yeah? No, she's not there. Jenna, just one more time, see if you're there. Are you there? I can see a movement. You're back, Jenna. Fire away.
I'm not sure exactly where I cut out. I was just talking.
You cut out as kind of being, from New Zealand, a very open-minded place, and then you found yourself here.
And so
you started your company.
Sure. So having started at 22, I was really young and naive essentially, and I just in New Zealand basically we have the mentality that, well, if you want to do something, then you just go ahead and do it. And so I think for me, having started off with that blank slate of not sort of being, I'm not sure corrupted is the right word, but sort of stained with the mentality that, no, it's not like that. I think it was great for me because I could just go in and say, well, let's have women, let's have our core values such as family first and work hard, play harder. And for me, that was just what you do because I hadn't sort of experienced what it's like not to. And sort of in the beginning, I really found that, you know, especially in Luxembourg and sort of in Europe in general, there was quite a lot of, what are you doing? You can't do things like that. That's not how we do tech. That's not how we do business. That's not what we do in Luxembourg, or Europe or London or wherever. And so I kind of just ignored it and sort of the, you know, the Kiwi mentality and that kind of mentality, and just continued with logic. You know, if we want more women, then we make our workplace hospitable to how women work and how women have babies and how families grow. And if we want to support our women, then we support our men. If there's a dance recital, if there's an event, then of course the dads can go, of course the parents can go, of course, you know. So for me, it was really just based on common sense. And I think that is the sort of the main pillar. If you sort of remove a lot of the complexity of this whole situation and a lot of social problems that we're actually facing today, it's just drill it down to its essence and actually use common sense. And I think that's always been our approach, and that's worked really well so far. I think, you know, the world tends to sort of make things a lot more complicated than they need to be. So that's what sort of my driving force has just been. If we want more women, how can we make an environment that's conducive to women? If we want different nationalities, how can we make people feel home, at safe, welcome, integrated into the company that we're doing? So it's not rocket science for me. It's really just been sort of the naive approach and building something that seems logical.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you. My dog's woken up with your voice. Naz, I've just seen that a question has come in here. Alistair Mason has said, the flexible remote working we've been forced into over the past 18 months will hopefully provide evidence that 9 to 5 without distractions isn't the only model. Hopefully this will help create a better environment for those, male or female, who have made the decision to become the primary child carer, which predominantly affects mothers. What does the panel think, and what have you seen in this regard? So I'll throw that to you, Naz.
Well, I'm muted, yes. I don't think I'm in the right position to answer that question. I can't really support that with any evidence or anything I've witnessed myself. So as mentioned, I've had people go on maternity leave, and they've come back and integrated back in as though they've, I believe, never left. I did review with them afterwards as to how they felt, and we keep continuous monitoring on that. To make sure that they feel comfortable, that they don't feel like they've been ostracized in any way. But other than that, I don't think I have much I can comment on this. I think I'll leave it to the other panelists to give their input.
Well, just to try to divide equal time amongst you, I'm going to go back to you, Naz, and I'm going to, because we're actually running out of time as well. But I want to say to you, I know you're often asked to be on these sorts of panels. From all of these panels, and in fact, you've probably all been on these panels, so I might make it perhaps, perhaps my final question to you. What have you learned from these panels that you've been on, and what do you hope our listeners, our audiences will take away from what you are giving today? So, Naz.
What have I learned? I've learned that there clearly is an ongoing issue with gender equality in the workplace, and that many feel the pain of that, and that we need to be doing something about it. I'm still a little puzzled amongst, I mean, we've seen a lot of suggestions, but I don't think there's one size fits all. I still believe myself that there is a more fundamental problem downstream, and I wonder the scale of that problem. I think that we need to encourage more, or create a place that's comfortable in order for women to succeed at the executive levels. I do question whether there's an issue in certain, particularly in certain careers. I mean, in Luxembourg, for example, 80% of legal associates that are joining the legal firms here are women. But then clearly there's a problem because that diversity is not represented at the partner level. Now, again, there we need to sort of look at choices that people have made, maybe themselves, to not continue to pursue their career. But I'm sure that there is an issue there, and I think that's where we need to look more at the problem. I think the world and the Western world has done a lot and continues to do a lot, is clearly evidenced by some of the actions that people on the panel here have taken, particularly at Vodafone. And I think more clearly needs to be done. But I think it's a tricky one. It's a tricky question, right? I do feel that sometimes, firms and organizations, and I feel a little sympathy for smaller businesses in particular, a little bit ostracized because they don't show an equal gender policy. And that sometimes that can be difficult, even in today's world. For a small business, maybe employing 10 or 12 people, it is actually very difficult when a person goes on maternity leave for a year. It's a huge impact, can be a huge impact to business. And I, from the people I've spoken to on that side, I haven't really seen what the solution is for the business as well, because it is a business, right? And it has a right to aim for and target profitability. I'm still confused and I'm not totally clear as to what can be done.
Yeah.
One thing I know for a fact is that I don't think quotas is the solution. I think that would probably make things worse.
Right. I'm not going to pick up on that point. I'm just going to throw the same question over to Katie now, really, from all of these boards that I leave it for a follow-up discussion on the chat, or for people to get into touch with you, because I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. Katie, what have you learned from these panels, and what piece of advice do you want to pass on and make sure it's drummed into our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say, with Nazir's point, I think that is so tough, especially with startups and I don't have the answer either. Like in my own early stage company, I really didn't get a chance to take a maternity leave, and that isn't the example that I wanted. But at the time, it was like our biggest contract we had ever have in this, small early stage 10-person business. And so, I think there's ways to kind of tackle that, but it continues to intrigue me, right, of how you approach that. So I just totally wanted to agree with that. I mean, I think what I've learned and like what really excites me is that we all didn't talk about like, oh, we're going to hire, female, we're going to invest in women. We talked about kind of our approach in so many entry points to this. And so I think continuing along that path of realizing it's not just deploying dollars, not just hiring women. And then also we all talked about it from a global lens, right? And, I'm investing in US, Europe, and UK. And so, on that maternity leave policy, I'm looking forward and saying, oh, what are innovative things that they're doing there? How have they made that work? How can we adopt some of these nuances into businesses here? And that's why I'm just so bullish of approaching this at a global lens. So love to hear it today. And it was awesome. So much I can always continue to learn too in participating in these.
Well, I've been blessed with a wonderful panel. So Jenna, over to you. I know you can probably, I saw you nodding in agreement there with Katie, the pain of having to juggle a newborn baby and work and, leading your own companies. So, well, anyway, that as an aside to the question, which is, what have you learned from these panels? Are you bored with them? What message do you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, sure. I think your point, Katie, of not leading by example, not wanting to lead with that bad example, but it just ends up happening because you have to, right? I think that needs to stop. But disparate times call for disparate measures, so I get it. I think it's been about maybe nearly 10 years I've been involved in sort of these kinds of discussions. I think I'm a little bit sad in one sense that it seems to be the same kind of discussions. I mean, obviously what we've seen in Vodafone today, it's really sort of been amazing, and it's been great to hear at that level. But I think the discussion points haven't changed and over the 10 years that I've been sort of involved. And I think, I think how I see this is it's a massive complex problem. We've got global warming. You're not going to fix global warming by having one solution. We're not going to fix this gender issue and this more sort of diversity issue by hiring more women, by having quotas. I think we need to start thinking about it at a much more global level. And I agree, a lot has been done globally in 10 years. That's not the point at all. But I think we need to have multiple different approaches. We need to we need to work on our hiring. We need to, India is a great example of the most amazing female computer scientists that I've seen. And it's completely normal in that culture. We need to work on the cultural level. We need to work on, you know, so many different levels that need to all work in parallel to actually fix this. And so once we have more diverse discussions with different kinds of people in different areas, I loved your idea, Katie, as well, of having different schools of thought involved. We just need to get this across many more different levels and sort of approach it in a different way and use different dialogue. And I think once that eventually happens, then we'll start to see some more concrete answers, and hopefully in 10 years we won't be having the same kind of discussions.
That's wonderful. I'm going to read a comment here from, you see, he or she, I don't know if it's a he or she, says, I feel it's important that systematic mentorship and strategic training is offered to all promising talent from early in their careers. So that's a statement. And the final word from my side goes to you. Your thoughts?
Great. Well, look, I talk about diversity and inclusion a lot, and I am asked to go in a lot of panels, and I do, because I want to make sure there's a female voice and a CEO voice and also to show what can be achieved and done. But you know, you say, what have I learned? It's just lovely to hear people from different sectors and different backgrounds, and to hear Katie talk about that virtuous circle and female founders and innovators and what she's doing from the fintech. It's fantastic, and thank you. And we need more of that, because that will drive more early startups and successful female. And we know, a lot of the investment they've looked at in the past year or two, the majority have gone to male founders. So actually, there has to be that focus. So I just congratulate you and thank you. And Jenna, I think it's great hearing about New Zealand and the culture and the way your background and brought up, where you didn't see the barriers and you could achieve anything. Because a lot of people talk in work now about their childhood, and especially women, to please or to be liked or to be the that took up a lot of the duties in the house. Actually, some of it can come from childhood and background and upbringing. And of course, Nassar talking about what you experience in your company. So look, I always learn some nugget, and I really appreciate it. But for me, again, I know, why are we talking about it 10 years on? We are. As I set up the Women's Network, I think 13 years ago in Vodafone, when I was B2B director. I don't think we're ever going to stop, unfortunately. I think it's 1,000 small things, which Jenna said, it's not one thing. And it is that virtuous circle and cycle. And there is, whether it's unconscious bias training, it's mentorship, it's sponsorship, all those things, whether it's, we won't say quotas, targets or KPIs, let's say, measurement of everything, reward, promotions, graduate intake, or policies. Well, all I can say is to people of big organizations, I have shown it can be done. So when I hear large organizations saying there's not the talent, there's not the there's not the talent, there's not the succession planning, they're just not there, it's simply not true. Okay, if they are there. And also, women participation in the workforce, it's actually quite low in Ireland, because people have stepped out, also for economic, that they don't need to work as well. So I have to work even more hard, to keep them there during the periods, which is important, young kids under 5 or whatever. So we overwork there to show them a future and to have the policy that keeps them there. So look, that I just want to say, and having that vision, to be the best employer for women by 2025, by that we'll be the best employer for everyone, for families, for men, for everybody. So look, I hope I've inspired a few male and female leaders to believe they can do it. And people don't often not need to do it. They're aware of it, but if they don't have everything in place to drive that, the right output and actions.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, I'm thanking all of you. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you to everybody who listened and joined in and were very active on the chat that I can see next to us here. Lots of thanks coming in there on the chat to you as well. And I'm going to now hand back to Sarah to end the discussion.
Thanks, Lisa, too, by the way.
Thank you.
Hi. Perhaps Becca, if you can switch my camera back on, that would be great. Thank you. But otherwise, I just want to extend my thanks to all the panelists. Sorry, just start my video. there you go. Really extend my thanks to all the panelists. It's been absolutely super, and yeah, fascinating to have Anne's perspective against Katie and Jenna, and also Nazir. And I agree with a lot of the participants joining us today that I think Anne has inspired, for those of us working in larger corporates, it's been inspiring to see the work that Anne has been doing, and it's certainly given me some food for thought for going back to my company. Thanks also to Lisa for moderating today, and to Shiv for her contributions as we've been preparing for this event. I'd like to thank Tomorrow Street and Vodafone for sponsoring this evening. And before we go, I would just like to highlight a couple of events we've got coming up with the British Chamber in the coming weeks. So between the October 7th and 13th, we have our leadership forum, where the theme is building a sustainable future. This is a series of events, both online between the 7th and the 12th at lunchtime, looking at sustainability from all different angles. And then we actually have an in-person event at the Chambre de Commerce at 6 o'clock on the 13th, where there will be a live panel discussion as well as some drinks and nibbles. So I do hope you can join us. On the 21st of October, there is a breakfast briefing with the British Ambassador, where the theme is creating positive connections. And in November, we have our very popular annual personal tax event. And finally, I'm pleased to confirm, subject to COVID restrictions, that we are bringing back the Christmas lunch in December, including the famous gin bar. So please do visit our website and sign up for those events. And I look forward to seeing you there. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.